Cool. All right, so we're recording now, right? I can.
Yeah, it
Oh
looks
yeah,
like
yeah,
it.
it says recording. Well, that was a great start. Um, Hi, Kynan.
Hi,
Yeah,
Upali.
I have a question for you.
Great.
um, yeah, I guess I was pausing for a dramatic effect there, but my question is, what are you excited about with practice, whether it's your own or your teaching practice or Dharma in general lately?
Hmm. Yeah. I think I'm excited about this just like continual unfolding. Um, I guess I thought at various points that there would be like more clear endpoints, or there would be a endpoint or something, or a point where it would feel like, okay, that's done, that's enough. But it really feels like it just continues to unfold, and with that unfolding, you know, more richness. Um, in my own practice, I've really been dealing with a lot of this, full range of emotions. We were talking just before about the love and the joy, but also the pain and the sorrow. And there's a certain kind of richness and complexity there that I really wasn't expecting to arise in practice when I started in my bedroom focusing on my breath. And yeah, I think that's what I'm really excited about. This unfolding in many dimensions, not just one way of thinking about practice or one way of practicing, and also that the even though there are these many dimensions and there's this richness and complexity, sometimes practice is just so simple, that actually just following the breath just like feels so good. And yeah, and just talking to people about, yeah, being able to, it's especially powerful, I think, to be able to talk to friends, Sangha members, students about just the power of the practice, basically.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed when we get to connect and talk about like Dharma in practice, like a lot of times we're connecting and it has to do with like teaching and the logistics of, what we're doing as teachers and planning and supporting in those areas. And then when we get into talking about our personal processes with just our practice and Dharma itself, uh, like the conversation sometimes gets so simple. Uh, like our conclusion. I remember one time it was like we were prepping to teach a class, but we were talking about Dharma, and we are just like, yeah, stuff happens and it keeps happening, and that was the profound conclusion of our conversation. It was like, yeah, I guess should we go like teach people that? Um, uh, I feel like I'm hearing that there too, and what you're describing is like, yeah, things just keep unfolding, and that's pretty great. Um,
Yeah.
uh, well, and connecting and in our process with that, I find that so nice and like joyful and playful. But I think I feel like I also notice like maybe this contrast or like this in my own experience, maybe it's just like a little bit of like a uh, insecurity. I don't know if insecurity is the right word, but it's like we could never teach that like as Dharma teachers or teach that in a class or I don't know, maybe we can, we're just not doing it. Or maybe sometimes we do, but that could never be like the entirety of the teaching. Like I just don't feel like I could hold much interest if every time I showed up, I was like, yeah, stuff keeps happening. Like, I just don't think people would be that interested in me as a Dharma teacher, if that was my Dharma. Or I don't know, maybe it's like the thing that's lacking from my Dharma teaching practice. Maybe that's what I need to do, and that's what would really captivate interest.
Yeah. Well, um, one of the many teaching mentors that I've had over the years used to always say, teaching Dharma is like selling water by the river. Um, the stuff it's just happening on its own, and you're just saying that it's happening. And I'm curious though, like it sounds like that is also part of your like teaching process, to like embody that, to be in that, and to like see what comes from the just happening. Um, does that seem right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that question makes me think of like, it's like there is simplicity, especially in that way that simplicity is feeling just authentic, like feeling really um, just good. That I want to be able to hold space for that and be in that, especially anything enjoyable about that. Be comfortable with that. Um, and at the same time, I also want to have this like capacity towards meeting and greeting complexity. Um, and maybe another way of saying that would be just attunement, right? Um, yeah, I was just talking to someone. I quote this a lot on retreats of like, yes, if we summed up the Four Noble Truths as pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. Like, in the places on meditation retreats where people are struggling and meeting complexity and intensity and challenged with it. If I were to sort of walk around and say, "Oh, just remember, suffering is optional," in people's darkest hours of their retreat, um, I joke that it's like would be the first recorded instances of violence on our like someone would punch me in the face. Like I feel like inevitably someone would punch me in the face if I just kept saying that, or at least think about wanting to do that. Yeah, that to me just seems so misattuned and not really honoring the complexity of that experience. That maybe ultimately that's the case, but in those relative moments, yeah, there's just something more that's needed. Um, so yeah, I guess that's my answer to your question in terms of the embodiment.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that, there's such a simplicity to the Dharma, and to, the experience of, this is just happening, there is dukkha, things like that. Just noticing that. But at the same time, trying to bring that into practice or bring that into experience will necessarily run up against a lot of complexity. And the way forward that you're describing is attunement, like being attuned to that complexity and responding to it
That's
skillfully
right.
in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Mhm. Yeah. And I think there's something about that that makes sense, right? Like on the one hand, the path and the practice could be just so simple of like just breathing or simply doing nothing. Um, and what we're talking about is just something that is vast and wondrous and infinite. We're just talking about what it is to be, to exist. What is it to be human? What is it to be conscious? And, those questions and explorations, maybe subjectively in process, could have that simplicity, but you don't have to look far to see the infinite complexity that's there too.
Mm. And here also, there's clearly a certain amount of complexity that comes from being, a person in the world. And, you and I are mostly teaching, or exclusively perhaps teaching lay people who live in the world in various different ways. Um, yeah, I'm wondering if there's anything else there around, yeah, like the complexities of practice meeting everyday life.
Yeah, well, that's a big one for me. One of the things I've been excited about is I think that side of meditation practice, where as lay practitioners, who are pretty devoted to a path of meditation, trying to meditate daily, or really interested in sort of this approach, this way of being, this way of seeing our experience. Um, yeah, like we're we're trying to figure out how to engage with path that a lot of the instruction and the information that we have, at least traditionally, is coming from what was designed for monastics. Um, so how to cultivate meditative practice and go deep within that and cultivate these very special conscious states meditation that are hopefully bringing us benefit and maybe even insight into something. Um, how do we let that meet just the reality of not being monastics, of like having families, of having jobs, of having just all the things that kind of connect us to the world. Um, yeah, so to try to say something that's maybe pithy here, or a little bit more pithy, because I feel like I could talk for hours on this. I just noticed that process for practitioners. It's like at first meditation and life are just like, two peas in a pod. It's like practice makes sense because it feels good. And then it really allows for life to feel good. And life maybe is kind of the thing that maybe motivated practice, saying, because life is this way, it'd be really nice to meditate. So these two things make a lot of sense together. And I think for a lot of the folks that we work with, it's like, myself included in this, you know, you start practicing more and more and more. It starts to really feel like life is very inconvenient towards meditation. And meditation makes you feel like, well, if I'm really going to get good at this, I need to be a monastic. Or life might be like, wow, there's just no time to do nothing. We've really got to stay engaged here. So for whatever reason, sort of like you get this fragmentation where they start feeling at odds with each other. And as a teacher, I think I originally saw my work as just supporting practitioners in a practice and refining the technique of practice. But now I really see a big part of my work to actually sort of bring these two back together, like to integrate such that they can reconnect again. Um, and that could be through a lot of different ways, but what we're looking at hopefully is something that it, it's exciting. Actually, is part that I get excited about. It's like something that's resilient. It's like um, wow, if you're able to hold space for and engage with all the things of a layperson's life and feel very integrated in the sense of like that your practice is fitting into that nicely, that there's space for both. Then it's like what you have is something just so resilient. Like and I see that. I've seen that for myself. I see that for others where they just talk about like life feeling really good and really meaningful and seeing how far they've come just on their journey of being a practitioner and a human, someone who just living life. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and that brings to mind. I was recently talking to a student who was, really interested in samadhi and working on samadhi practices and getting quite deep in it. But there was this sort of experience where, if the samadhi wasn't available, that they didn't have as much time to meditate, or it just wasn't going as well for a week or two, the the motivation to practice kind of dropped off, or it felt kind of brittle. It didn't feel so resilient or robust. And so then it became more about, well, actually, like, yeah, how can we work with that and bring a different relationship to the practice and a different relationship to how practice fits in with life? Um, and actually, that's where a lot of progress seems to be occurring, of like actually allowing that lens to shift, so that the two aren't so separated, and they can be the two peas in the pod, as you
Totally.
described.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a lot of how I described my practice in the past years. It's like, well, show up to the cushion and try to cultivate samadhi. And if samadhi arises, then great. And then if it doesn't, just integrate anything that gets in the way of samadhi arising. And that's the practice.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's a really nice framework. That seems to, that really covers a lot of ground. And I guess I'm curious, extending on that, asking you the question that you asked me at the beginning of this. Yeah, is there anything in practice, or in, life, teaching practice or cushion practice, that feels really inspiring or exciting to you at the moment?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So there is something that comes to mind, which is, mm, ooh, there's so many ways that I can put this into words. So I just have to pick something and go with it, I guess. We're gonna start here. It's a little bit roundabout, but have I told you like this story of Upali, like my namesake? Um, I was reading about Upali recently, and I learned some new things. Did I tell you about that?
Oh, not the new things. I think all I know is
Hmm.
Upali was a
Yeah,
barber. That's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
about it.
Um, right. I always wonder what Upali would think about like my hairstyles. Like maybe she wouldn't care. Maybe he was just like shaving people bald since he was a monastic. But um, uh, yeah. So Upali was a barber. Upali also, after the Buddha died, recited the Vinaya, which is the monastic code. Um, and I found it like not that interesting, and maybe a bit like difficult to connect with on this aspect of Upali, because it's like, it just seems like all the rules for monastics, uh, there's a lot in there. It doesn't feel all that relevant to me, and a lot of it seems kind of dogmatic and antiquated. So it's like, Vinaya is interesting, but not necessarily the thing that I'm really excited. If I'm going to go to some source text, like Vinaya is not the number one thing that comes to mind for me. Um, but I forget where I came across it, but there's a story of Upali and the Buddha, and when Upali joined order, like I guess became one of the foremost of one of the Buddha's disciples, I guess call him that. And Upali goes to the Buddha and he says, I really want to get good at concentration practice. Um, so I'm going to go off into the woods and uh, practice concentration. And for me, that's very resonant. It's like, oh yeah, Upali, that's my guy right there. That's what I like to do. Is I like to go off into the woods and meditate, and really towards like absorption. And the Buddha's response was actually, um, well, you could do that, but uh, that is a very hard way to cultivate concentration. Very difficult path. And I think it'd be better if you stuck around here in the community, in the Sangha. Um, so, well, again, I'm having a bit of source amnesia there, and this is maybe a bit of my own interpretation, but uh, one thing that I took from that is that I think, you know, going back to and the Buddha dies, and then Upali, he's the one who recites the entire Vinaya. Like my understanding of this is just that he was a master of community and how community works, and what works within community. And and so I've had this thought of like, if you think of these practices that we're doing that are handed down through generations of monastics, some of them, um, when we're practicing as lay people, part of that sense of like just us practicing on our own, and there's a practice, and then there's life. I imagine like for monastics, it's like you're in this process of just constant integration, right? Like in community, it's like you're practicing and then you're talking about practice. There's this perpetual feedback loop of just connection happening around what's unfolding within your experience, maybe within your meditation, or maybe just life in general. And I think that's probably, my stereotype of a monk or archetype would be, yeah, someone alone in the woods meditating. But really, when I've met monastics and spent time with monastics, they're some of the most social people that I've met, and seem to be really committed to this life where there is quite a bit of connection and community. So this is getting this kind of a long answer, but it's getting towards what I'm excited about lately. And I would say it's just that side of, in addition to that integration, that practice of integration with meditation and life, it's like, I really hope that the practice leads me to a sense of connection, but also seeing where life really leads to that too. And these moments in relationship that are leading to greater and greater sense of connection and greater sense of ease, and then greater and greater capacity to sit down and meditate and be connected and feel ease and like really have that flourish, and basically just that feedback loop of finding ease and connection in relationship and seeing how that is actually maybe even essential, but at the very least efficient towards our practice unfolding and flourishing. Uh, which goes back to the very pithy thing that I learned from uh, Mark, who is uh, a friend and someone who's practiced with me and is also a teacher. And he says he's the first person to say, at least in my recollection, of like a meditation is a team sport. So I think it kind of comes back to, well, yeah,
Yeah. Nice. Which is also why it's so lovely for us to have these calls and why I appreciate so much being able to chat and
yeah.
share the
Thanks for
practice.
asking me that question. And um, yeah, yeah, you got to be careful asking me what I'm excited about. Might take a little while.
I I knew the risks.
Well, this has been a nice chat. I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to touch on or explore before we finish?
Yeah, that
Nice.
feels good to me.
Well, until next time, then, I guess.
All right. Until next time.